Hey you, Meowkaiser coming at you today with 7 tips in order to get better at flexing. Flexing is a very important part of Immortal Soul Black survival. It is the reason why rooting is considered to be a bit weaker than just pure flexing. And the reason is that a lot of times when you go into the game, you'll find yourself in fights and you won't be able to win them. Therefore you can't keep the area and you get kicked out. So, roots tend to be shaken up a lot in this game in comparison to Eternal Return, because in Eternal Return you can kind of still be in that same area despite losing a fight without dying, whereas in this game, if you stay in the same area, you will die. Now my first tip is to learn every armor piece, food, and stamina recipe in this game. Now, before you click off, I know most of you guys probably don't know every single thing on here, and you don't have to sit down and write down all the recipes. That's not what I'm asking you to do. The best way to really learn all the recipes in the game is to go through this and pick something that you haven't built before, right? So let's say you have never built, let's just say you've never built Tactical OPS Helm. Look at this recipe, go into your next game and force it. Now, generally speaking, forcing items is very weak and will cause you to lose, but as you're learning the game, it is okay to lose. It is okay to experiment, find out what doesn't work, but at the same time, by forcing these, you're learning how to build them and you're learning where the items are, right? And so this is a very effective way of learning the game much faster than you normally would. My second tip is to try to work on multiple items at the same time rather than hyper-focusing on one thing. Most new players are very guilty of this. Most notably is that they will just pick some purple weapon, they will rush it at the start of the game, and they don't know why they're losing trades despite them getting their weapon out very quickly. And the answer to why you're losing trades is because you only focused on making your weapon, but you skipped past multiple different items that you could use to build your armor, right? A good example of this is, let's say we decided to start well, right? And we're tunneling on getting a knuckle, right? Let's just say we're playing hand. I've seen tons of players just skip Iron Balls when they're here, except Iron Balls is just one item away from making a blue leg gear, just free 20 armor, right? You know, tons of stuff like that. People are skipping leather, they're skipping turtle shells. You know, you have tons of options for armor that are in the same area that you're just simply not paying attention to. And so being aware of your options is super important, as well as trying to be aware of okay, if I pass this item, can I actually use it for something? Is it something that I can use for an armor gear I do not have? You need to be getting yourself into this train of thought. My third tip is to select areas based on overlapping items. So most notably, a lot of people already kind of do this, where they go for scrap metal, they make themselves a steel, and then they use the 2 steels for their weapon and their armor, right? Now, what I'm trying to say is that we want to be selecting areas that have as many items that we need as possible, right? So for example, let's say we're doing a steel set. We have our scrap metal already, we have a knuckle, right? So we need iron ore to upgrade the knuckle. The iron ore can also be used to make the steel. And part of the steel set requires leather, because you need the leather for the turtle shell to make leather shield into the steel shield, right? So one area that we can pick that has multiple items overlapping that we need is forest, right? Forest has the leather that we need later. It also has feather for our wing knuckle. We can also grab an extra feather to make a mask later. I'll get into that extra feather later. The iron ore is here. There's granted not as many here, but if we start finding the leathers we need early, we can choose another area that has more iron ore later. And then it has oriental grass for food. It has flowers to make herbs quickly. You know, there's a lot of different things that we can pick here that's really helpful to us. And then, we can later move on to archery range, which has our fabric armor that we need for our sheet metal armor. It has our pickaxe that we also need. It has 1 flower if you get it. And it has glasses, which we can start making towards the close helm. Maybe we already have glasses, you know, then we can go to temple and pick up some cloth or thick paper, which are also useful for other recipes, right? So try to get into the habit of thinking, what area has the most things I need, right? And also factor in food, factor in stamina, not just your armor and your weapon when you're making these decisions. My fourth tip is to theory craft your own routes. I don't actually give out routes on my channel because I know that a lot of you guys will just pick up the routes and stick with it every single game and then ask me, why am I not winning? The thing is that routes are not realistic, but theory crafting routes does something, and it's a good, really good mental exercise where you pick an area that you want to start in, you start thinking of like, okay, what weapon can I build there, and then where can I go to make certain armors, right? And so, for example, let's start Lighthouse, let's start theory crafting route, we want to start going for Bloodwing Knuckle, right? So, I could route straight to Trail and like start rushing out the Bloodwing Knuckle, get the gemstone, get the feather and the iron ore. But there's other ways that we could take this routing, right? We can grab 2 rubbers. We can use those rubbers to make the handbok and wristband, right? We can, instead of finishing our weapon, we can start going for a steel set using the iron ore we find at Lighthouse. Go somewhere for scrap metal, start going for the sheet metal, and just finishing our weapon later. And what theory crafting your own routes does is it gets you into the habit of thinking, where can I go? What options do I have? And this way, if you get interrupted, you have a better idea of where to go, rather than being like, my route didn't tell me what to do after this, I don't know what to do. Because you already theory crafted multiple different routes for you to do, you have an idea of what you can do. My 5th tip is to recognize when you can build an item backwards. This one's a little bit harder to understand, especially for people that watch my stream. They'll see me start building an item backwards. They don't really know what item I'm working on. And the most common offender is Hero Helmet. Sometimes people will see me without, holding the bike helmet or fire helmet, and I start picking up a TV, and I pick up a glass cup, and I'm like, cool, I can make a hero helmet. And people wonder how I get to this conclusion off of these 2 items alone. And it's like, it's something that I can start working on really early on, and then later I won't actually need the pieces for LCD panel later. I can just start working towards the racing helmet. And by spending some inventory space earlier on working on this, I get out my build faster. So always recognize when you can build an item backwards. You don't have to follow the recipe from the start. You can follow it from the end and still be able to get there just as fast. My 6th tip is to get into the habit of not dropping items unless you know for a fact you do not need it. I think a really good example of this, and lots of people get upset at me for doing this, where they just see me holding around iron sheets, or they see me holding around mithrils or steel or turtle shells that I don't currently need for my build. But the reality is maybe somebody dies and I will pick up an item piece and I'm like, wait, I needed that steel earlier, but I decided to drop it to make inventory space. If I don't need the inventory space right at the moment, it is best to just hold on to items whenever you can, and hopefully you use it in the future. Sometimes you will get rewarded for it, and a lot of people actually see on my stream where I get rewarded. I pick up an item off of a corpse, and I happen to be holding an extra steel that I can use for it right away. And people call it streamer luck, but really it was just me being prepared for something like that happening. And my 7th tip is to pay attention to animal random drops to see if they can accelerate your gear or get you some free food. Most notably, the hunting dog has inside of his drop table an icebox supply and a type A supply. Type A supply being a weapon. Those weapons include things like fountain pens and other weapons that are actually available for your build, like, hammers and stuff. And so instead of only paying attention to like what you know is guaranteed to be dropped by the animal, take a glimpse over to see what random item got dropped by the animal and think really quickly, can I use this for my build? Do I need this? By paying attention to that and being able to quickly assess that, you will make yourself a much more powerful player. So that's my quick and dirty 7 tips on how to be better at flexing. I hope you guys find this to be very helpful and useful to you guys. I wish you good luck in your ranked games. If you really want to support me, hitting that like button helps me out a ton, so does subscribing and leaving a comment. I really appreciate you guys, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.